Morning, and here we go again. Um, I thought I'd like to share with you when Tom and I set up Artolo a good few years ago now. We did some research on the market, and at the time there were 70,000 graduates, art graduates, coming out of art colleges every year, and that was just in the UK. 70,000 fine art graduates coming out of one course or another in the UK, and that's every year. Now, I'm presuming that number's dropped, but who knows? I mean, it might not, but that's an incredible amount of people expecting to make a living out of being a fine artist. Um, Now, I know, not everyone's doing that course to be a fine artist, and there's all sorts of reasons to encourage creative thinking and to explore ideas and materials and all the rest of it. And not everyone that does a fine art course does become a fine artist. They go on to become musicians or whatever it is. I mean, you know, they soon find other routes, but it's given them a grounding in creative thinking. Um, so Claire's point that she presented was about the freedom to be creative and have the space to do it, and the fact that the education system doesn't really enable that anymore because it's so costly. And I think a lot of artists struggle with that anyway, that space and time to be able to give it justice. But I don't think that is exclusive to artists. I think if you are a pure mathematician, trying to find a university to give you the space and the time to investigate certain models, it's still difficult for those people on the outreaches of their practice, where there's no practical function for these things, not often anyway. So I'm all for the creative thinking, but Louis presented the idea that he's not telling or hasn't sort of introduced his students to the real world of business, the art business, because he didn't want to sort of that wasn't part of the deal of being an artist. Um, I personally disagree with that. I think, and I understand why. There's a sort of romanticism in that, but I disagree with it because I think um, they need to be presented with the reality of it. And I think one of the reasons why it wasn't presented, certainly in the earlier days of art school, is because there wasn't an alternative to be presented. The understanding of how the sort of that gets tied up with what is the function of art and how are you being productive. And this is how it's used politically. Is it productive? Um, and it's all justified on numbers. But to not tell your students about the art world business, I think, is um, setting up a sort of whole series of disappointments, and they need to be aware of the reality of it. Now, I do think there's a lot of art lecturers that aren't aware. They don't know about how the art world operates financially and commercially. I mean, apart from their experience of going to the big galleries, um, and that's partly because it's a closed shop too. I mean, that's understandable, but um, I think um, making your students aware, it doesn't mean to say that there's still not a viable way of being a creative artist, you know. Um, and having raised this question about um, whether everyone's an artist, um, it came. I mean, it came to mind the time when Zaha Hadid uh, claimed that she was an artist because she'd done some paintings, and it's frustrated the hell out of me. It's like I'm a professional thinker, I'm going to become a painter. And because I'm a notable person, they get taken seriously. Um, and I think she's done amazing things as an architect. So anyway, at the time, I came up with the declaration that I was an architect. And I did a whole lecture. I did a sort of series of lectures for various places and came up with a whole body of work based around the fact that, um, I was in the same way that Zaha Hadid was claiming that she was a painter, an artist, then so I was doing the same in claiming I was an architect. And, I can quite see that I could, if I dedicated myself to that, you've got engineers and other forms to help you make it viable and practical. Um, but there's the same sort of professional, indignation that occurred from architects when I declared that I was an architect and my designs were worth as much as theirs. And it also came from the fact that I'd been working with architects for a while and seen, some of the processes that had been involved with. Um, and I think that I'm all for genres and disciplines to be questioned by outsiders, because that way you get new thinking, and that cross fertilization of disciplines I think is very important. Um, and I've always been a strong advocate of the science art sort of mix. Um, it doesn't necessarily work for both, but it certainly enables both disciplines to come up with new ways of looking at their own work. Andrew raised the point about, I mean, you chose to become a social, doing social sort of art, and I can quite see why. I mean, it's very admirable and it's great, and it is justifiable in terms of function. Productivity is sort of easily explainable. And again, I think this is often used politically. It's like art can become social work. And you presented a link, Andrew, to the taxi driver podcast, which I listened to. Was of interest. I was initially put off, but then it got more and more involved in it, talking about fabrication. It felt a little bit naive to start off with, but then at the end of it, the discussion about the metaverse and people wanting to become sort of the advocate of the person designing the metaverse, um, saying that it'll be a solution to people being creative individuals. Well, it fills me with horror, this thought that this art becomes this opium, this activity, the opium of the people. It's like we're going to make them all unemployed in this new virtual world, and the only way we can keep them occupied is getting them to do virtual art. Um, and how undermining is that? And not only that, we're getting AI developing and generating art now. So you might be right in the terms of that idyll of the romantic artist, but I don't think we should be worried. I'm not fearful of that demise. I think we have to look forward, and I think this is where the arts community gets a bad rap, gives itself a bad name, because it ends up being protective and traditional and conservative and not wanting to look forward, not wanting to take on the challenges. Um, so, and you also mentioned about getting rid of the ego. Well, I think, that's every religion in the world has pretty much sort of tried that one. So good luck with that. I think we're going to struggle mightily. Great ambition, but, we are human. And ego, if there is, for what that definition is, we have them. And anyway, again, thank you for your engagement with these. I'm very sort of flattered by some of your comments. I hope I do your responses justice too. And there's various things coming, I'd like to try and deal with at some point as well as dealing with your responses to my comments. So thanks very much.